This show is about Milton Glaser's long history and relationship with SVA, a body of work created for a single client over 50 years. And to have the opportunity to have created such a humongous body of work for a single client over 50 years, I think is a special opportunity for any designer. It's all uniquely his work, but it's all very different. And I think you can see the evolution in his style over the years, but I think that it's all clearly, came from him.
One of the things you're always thinking about in designing anything is the degree to which your audience understands what it is you're trying to tell them. Sometimes you have to be oblique, and sometimes you are so oblique that nobody understands what you're talking about. For instance, here, this was an announcement for 12 tuition-free full-time scholarships to the school. And I thought of the idea of 12 plums, because that was a phrase that I grew up with. That's a plum job. But I later realized that the phrase itself might have disappeared from the vernacular, and people didn't make the association of plums and benefits. So the first thing was, I realized this image of 12-something, 12 plums perhaps, was not necessarily understandable. Also in those days, the job was a two-color job, hand-separated. So I had to do the blue plate separately and the red plate separately, and then overlapping them, assuming that they would come together and look like plums. This just vaguely looks like plums. In addition, there was a visual joke. The visual joke is that all these highlights, these white elements on the plum to define its shape, appear above in positive, as though they had jumped off this surface and found their way upwards. I have no idea whether anyone ever got that joke, and truthfully, I don't care very much. This was an idea about a show of sculpture and architecture and their interrelationship. And the idea here, of course, was to show this cube on the surface of the building and then show it on the inside with nothing changing except the shadow itself. And there's a little optical trick just about the nature of how you represent form and how little shift you need to go from the outside to the inside. I quite like this. This is the first poster I ever did for the school, and therefore has a special place in my heart. But it still holds up pretty well. I'm not ashamed of it. And I had this bust at home for a long time. I don't know why I linked this phrase, our faculty is empathy, imagination, enthusiasm, you benefit, which is kind of straightforward, with this peculiar drawing of a classical bust with a landscape on it. But for some reason, that's the image that came to mind, and it worked very well, I have to say, in the subway, perhaps because of the clarity and simplicity of the image. It's not a very complex layout, to say the least, but it had some impact and proved to be effective. There was no back and forth. I mean, I did it, I painted it, I took the mask to Silas, I said, this is what I'd like to do. And that was the end of the game. The truth of the matter was that in those days, in my recollection, there was very little back and forth. The great thing about working with Silas, I have to say, was that he really trusted my judgment and was very open. I sort of don't think he looked on it as a matter of his personal taste at all. He just assumed that if he gave a poster to somebody, they had the inclinations to do it correctly, and he wasn't going to interfere, unless he felt that the nature of the message was being misrepresented. But that very rarely occurred. I'll see in terms of walking around whether we, in fact, had any examples where that was the case. But my recollection is that it wasn't. Okay, maybe this is the worst poster I ever did for the school, even though I think the idea has validity. And I like the idea that you saw something in the clouds and that reminded you of something, and you made a rabbit out of it. So there's an inferred rabbit in the cloud, and then the actual rabbit. But I couldn't quite come to terms with how to execute this. So it is not exactly the most elegant poster. This is an important poster that the school produced right after 9/11. In fact, the same week as 9/11, we did a little version of this, I Love New York More Than Ever, because I Love New York didn't seem to be enough after 9/11. And the students posted it all over the city. We had 5,000 small posters. And it was something that people really responded to, because we all had that sense that what had happened, the degree of intensity that you normally don't feel. You know, when somebody we love gets sick, we suddenly feel more intensely how deeply we love them. And finally, actually, my most recent poster for the school, which really is a poster as much for the show as it is for anything else, is something I'm very interested in currently, which is things that are at the edge of perception, which you can't quite see, that require meditation or attentiveness. With the phrase, looking is not seeing. I'm in the middle of doing a series of black prints, which are invisible until you stop and spend some time looking at them, and then the forms gradually emerge. That seems to me to be a topic not sufficiently explored, except it is not the kind of thing you can generally use to communicate directly and clearly to an audience.